Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this special session about the art of feedback. And if anyone knows anything about me in here, you know that I am big on evaluations and feedback and how we serve it up specifically to other people. Just a little background on me. I have done several competitions with Toastmasters where I have done table topics, which you've done in a competition form, and evaluation is specific contests. So people get a chance to practice their skills and see how they're able to give and craft information on the fly. We're going to take it a little bit slower this time. So I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to get started with the art of feedback and why it is art. So give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Perfect. So welcome to the Art of Feedback. Again, I'm Lauren Merritt-Taylor. I am big on feedback. So the way that we're going to serve this up today is we're going to start with the table of contents. You can still see my table of contents. Excellent. So we're going to start with part one, which is just a brief introduction. Part two, Toastmasters application for our guests and our newer Toastmasters who may not understand how we piece that together. And then how to truly apply that feedback into the real world with examples, because a lot of us are in our professions or we own our own businesses. Whatever the case may be, this is for you and how to do it even better. And then, of course, evaluation and purpose. What's the purpose of truly evaluating and giving feedback? It seems like a simple answer, but we're going to break that down and we're going to end with Q&A. So let's get this thing started. So just a quick introduction. I'm not asking anything profound. I'm not asking an ostentatious question, just two simple ones. Just drop in the chat. Do you like to eat? Do you like to cook or serve? So when it comes to your food, I know you all throw down in the kitchen or maybe you order a great restaurant meal, whatever the case may be. Do you like to cook / serve? Do you like to eat? And truth be told, everyone's hand should be up or everyone should be in the chat because I don't know how you're here if you don't like to eat. And I'm asking these questions for a purpose. So all that, but no cooking. I like to eat, not big on cooking. I understand. I would prefer that people serve me. I'll cook if I need to, but honestly, I just like the food part. I like the end result part. So both, definitely yes to both. Thank you so much for responding, ladies. So here's what you need to understand about cooking and serving versus eating. Feedback is like that. You have the evaluator who is crafting information or an opinion for you and then serving that to you. And then you, as the person on the other end of that feedback, you're basically eating, ingesting, digesting, which brings me to my next slide. Serving it up. And the way that you serve up feedback is going to be absolutely essential. So with ingestion, when you receive your evaluation in Toastmasters or somewhere else on your job, wherever it may be, you're taking it in and you're listening to what's being said. That's the ingestion process of feedback. So you're taking that in. So when I'm talking about serving up, we're feeding each other. And then there's digestion. You're processing the evaluation, you're thinking about it, and you're breaking down those opinions, and you're figuring out, okay, I think I see where we're going with this. So you're trying to stomach what's being said. And I know that may sound like an odd comparison, but it truly fits together. What we're putting out there and what we're serving up others as far as our opinions and what we piece together to be able to help them. So ingestion, digestion. So that's what you're doing as the cook or the person who's serving. So when you put it up on your platter, is it nicely decorated? Have you made sure that it was done with love and care and maybe some roughage on the plate because we know that we need something to be able to improve upon. So you're crafting and thinking about how you're piecing this together on your quote unquote feedback plate. Now on the other end, we have what we call the emotional response. So I know some of you have probably made some of these faces when maybe you've received some feedback and maybe you didn't necessarily agree with it, or perhaps the way it was served up to you was a bit harsh, a bit rough, whatever the case may be. So just in the chat, have any of you ever made any of these faces when someone has given you their opinion about something, whether it be hair, clothes, your time on the job? Have you made any of these faces? Yes, yep, I have. You don't have to say which one specifically. I can probably guess. But we all have an emotional response to feedback. So once you are done with the whole ingestion and digestion process, then you get to the part where is there upset? Do you feel uneasy or defensive about the feedback received? So you're trying to figure out, can I stomach this? Is it going to stay where it needs to stay? Or am I going to reject it? So going from upset to reject. So choosing to ignore or mentally toss feedback due to delivery. Because again, I'm going to keep saying it throughout this presentation. You can have the best opinion in the world in your mind, but if it's not served up in a way that's going to be palatable for the person who is receiving the information, they're going to reject it like you would food that doesn't sit well with you, or they're going to toss it maybe politely away, never to be seen or heard from again. And I'm sure we've done that with various dishes, but again, the same thing happens with feedback. So there's the emotional response. And the emotional response isn't a terrible thing. We are people. We are going to react to what we hear based on what we saw the person do, what we heard them say, and how we felt about that. The emotional response is fine, but it's also how we choose to deliver our emotional response in not necessarily in defense of what a person was saying, but in response to what was going on. So the person is giving you something, you're taking it in, and then how you give it back or what you say in response to that is also just important when it comes to communication and feedback. So evaluating in Toastmasters. This is one of my favorite parts because people are always asking me, how are you able to give such a thorough evaluation, Lauren? I see so many skilled Toastmasters and so many skilled people out in the professional world, and they make it look so effortless. Well, here's the thing. There is a method, at least for me. I'm not saying that my word is the end all be all, but it's something that I found to work that's tried and true. And in Toastmasters, when you should piece together a solid evaluation, there should be strengths, there should be weaknesses, not necessarily weaknesses, but improvements is what we say, and then a conclusion. So strengths, improvements, conclusion, and you wrap it all up in that way. So with strengths, but before we get there, with strengths, there are some concerns that people have with feedback in general. Okay, so there are top 3 concerns that people have before they even get to the point of feedback in Toastmasters or anywhere else. So the first thing I hear people typically say is, I don't know what to say. How do I know what to say to my supervisor or to my business partner or to my mom or my dad or whomever you're giving feedback to based on something that you notice could be improved upon? I don't know what to say. The second thing that I notice that people say in regards to not giving feedback is, I don't want to offend the speaker. You're not really sure how to deliver information in a way that you feel isn't going to be harmful. Maybe you think that you're going to be curt or blunt or something along those lines, and you are a bit apprehensive to say what it is that you need to say. And then the final concern in regard to giving feedback anywhere is the speaker has more experience than I do. Here's the thing, none of that matters. Okay, especially the last part. There's always going to be someone who has more experience than you, but it doesn't mean that you do not have something valuable to say or add. So with those concerns, I want you to just take them out of your head and just tell yourself right now, I have something valuable to say and add to this situation that's going to produce the results that I'd like. So you have something valuable to say. So it doesn't matter whether it's a distinguished Toastmaster, the world champion of public speaking, your boss's boss's boss. If they ask you, or if there's an opportunity to give that feedback, you have something important to say. Now, aside from the 3 concerns, I want to give you 3 reminders. First of all, an evaluation is an opinion. Again, it's what you heard, what you saw, and what you felt. I'll say it again. What you heard, what you saw, and what you felt. An opinion is simply that as far as evaluation goes. So anyone can give an evaluation. which is why I said you can evaluate anyone. That's number two. You can evaluate anything and you do it all the time. You give movie reviews and restaurant reviews. You let your significant other know what they could do to improve within the relationship. You go out and test drive a car and say, oh, this would be a fantastic thing to buy, but if they did this particular thing, it would make it all the more better. So you evaluate on a daily basis, whether you realize it or not. So you have the skills, you just have to understand how to piece that together. And then the final thing about the reminders is evaluation should be speaker focused. It's so easy, especially within Toastmasters, to get off on a tangent and talk about, oh, this is how this relates to me, and here's another anecdote or story. That's all well and good. But within Toastmasters, typically you have 2 to 3 minutes to say what it is that you need to say. And so the important things need to happen first, but you can't give the important things, the strengths, the improvements and such, if you kind of go off and start talking about other things that don't directly apply to the speaker. Because the idea is to help them with change and growth. So remember, an evaluation is an opinion. You can evaluate anyone and anything, and evaluation should be speaker focused because oftentimes there's not a lot of time, whether it be in Toastmasters for that 2 to 3 minute window, or even if it's a survey somewhere. It's a short survey and giving long responses, it just depends. So just make sure that when you're typing or when you're talking, make sure it is speaker focused. And remember, you can drop questions in the chat if you have any of them along the lines of this presentation. So let's start with strengths. So when you are giving an evaluation or feedback to anyone, of course you want to talk about what they are doing well. People are more apt to listen to you when you kind of set the foundation for what their strengths are. And so the great thing to do in Toastmasters is to say what went well. You say what went well, you give an example, and you say why it worked. So notice under say what went well, there's introduction, there's body language, there's vocal variety. Maybe their highs and their lows of their voice really captivated you during their speech or their presentation. Perhaps the way they leaned to the side or really got close to the camera, perhaps it's a virtual presentation, really kept your focus. You want to say why that was impactful by pulling that out and saying why it worked, because you want them to continue to do this specific thing. For instance, if I say, Carla, I noticed that your background is very bright or colorful. Your couch pops on the back wall and your pictures are really intriguing. I think you should continue to set up your background that way when you do a virtual presentation because it's not super distracting. I can still focus on what you're saying, but I can also tell that you took the time to figure out that this is going to be the best way to present myself on screen. You see how we string that together? I want you to continue doing this action because it works for whatever you are trying to do, whether it be a presentation, speech, or whatever it is that you're doing online. So that's how we piece together our strengths. Now with improvements get to be a little bit tricky because people may follow this format, may follow the simple format like strengths do. They say what needs work. They give an example. And they say why it needs work. But the thing that some people drop off at the end is providing a solution. So with improvements, we say pacing went well, but didn't go as well as it could have, or eye contact. You pull that out, you say how it distracts or detracts from the speech, but then as the person who is providing feedback, you're serving it up properly, you need to provide a solution. So I say that, who am I going to pick on today? If I say that, Ashley, I think that your pacing was great. It was almost, if I say that your pacing needs work, you were rushing through your speech and you got to your conclusion and it was hard for the audience to catch up and really catch your main points. If you take a breath and pause in between your points, the audience are going to be able to receive it and retain it better, because that's what you want as the speaker. So I'm giving a solution that she can potentially use to make sure that her speech, her talk is better or more improved upon the next time. And then for Toastmasters, we also conclude. Again, a great practice for real life examples. You recap the strengths and improvements. You end on a high note. You want to motivate the speaker. You want them to come back and say what they're saying and do what they're doing. So recap the strengths and improvements, end on a high note. And remember that it's a mini speech. So you introduce, you have that meat, that substance, and then you conclude. And that's actually part of a technique called the sandwich method. Bread, meat, bread. So intro, strengths and improvements, and then conclude. So let me give you an example. Let's say that, who can I pick on? Let's say that Kathy gave a fantastic speech just now. And Kathy's speech was about anything like traveling. And I said, Kathy, your speech was phenomenal. You immediately brought us in by saying travel is a means of escapism. That was super strong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift and tell you one thing that you can improve upon and one thing that you did well. The first thing is your strength. Your strength is your ability to tell stories. We can picture ourselves up in the air with you, the beauty of the clouds descending and going down on the runway and how bumpy and jumbly it was. I think that when you do this, you really help the audience immerse themselves within your story. Now for the improvements, I think that you could make sure that we see your eyes a lot more. I noticed that you're looking to the right, you're looking to the left, but we really don't see you virtually. And with a virtual presentation, you need to make sure that you're looking at that bright dot right there on the laptop or computer screen or whatever device that you're using, so you can ensure that we are one-on-one. It should feel like you're speaking directly to me, even if we aren't in the same room. So if you continue to use storytelling and you make sure that you have stronger eye contact, I know that you'll be able to tell the story on any platform and blow them away. That's how you can piece together, or it's an example of how you can piece together an evaluation in a way that benefits the person who's receiving it and also builds them up. All right, we're moving on. Are you all still with me? I hope you were ready for the next frame because it's a bit of a shocker. It's a real life example of application of feedback in the world that may not be so digestible. So take a look at this. I have blocked out the name of the restaurant for obvious reasons, because our goal is not to embarrass anyone, but to demonstrate a better way of perhaps getting our opinion across. So pretend that you are the Google reviewer, okay? You told me for my new restaurant that a price adjustment is needed, or I really need to step up my game on the food. You gave me a 3 out of 5, said the service was 3 out of 5, and the atmosphere was 4 out of 5. And my response to you is, when people are used to Burger King, maybe the change they think is needed is not a price downgrade or a quality upgrade, but maybe they just need to keep their behind at Burger King. Someone respond in the chat and tell me, by reading this, what your feelings are, what your emotional response is. I told you to keep going to Burger King because you can't afford my food. How do you feel about that? Just feel free to drop it in the chat. Don't be shy. Okay, offended. Anyone else? Offended, not going to that restaurant? Angry with this because you're assuming from my statement that I can't afford the food. Exactly. And this is the owner's response. This is a real response, something that I pulled from Google review for everyone to see. oh, I guess you don't want to be keeping that restaurant. And that's true. And it's exactly, as the person who is receiving the feedback, they didn't really have a response that was going to really produce results. This person gave you their opinion and you became offended, and what you threw back, what you got upset, you rejected it. And then the way you rejected it was less than professional for a business owner. And yes, they did also target a specific group of people. These are the comments, the reviews that aren't as terrible. I omitted a few of them because they could be considered extremely offensive and possibly again cause upset online here. But the point is that this is a real life example of how some people feel when they receive feedback. It doesn't always go well. And the way that you respond is just as important as what the person says. So it's not just about the evaluator. The evaluator, yes, should give up a very balanced evaluation, but how you respond to it is equally as important, because if not, it ceases to be communication. It's not dialogue, it's a monologue, because I want to say what I want to say and you want to say what you want to say, but there's no common ground. But this doesn't mean that you have to incorporate every single thing a person says about what you need to adjust, but you should take the time to say, do they have a point? Is this something I can address and say, okay, I see where you're coming from. Here's what I'd like to do in the future because you're my customer. So yes, this is a real life example of what happens. Now, when it comes to application, again, with Toastmasters, you can apply what I just did to here. So if this were you, so let's just say you have the chance to delete all this, the owner's response, and respond in a way based on what we're talking about. What would you say instead? Instead of saying, I can't change my menu for a small minority. What would you do to touch up this particular response from the owner? And you can come off, I don't know if they can come off mute, but if they can, if someone just wants to just say it out loud, that's fine as well.
I think I would say, thank you for your feedback. That is something that we can look at as we adjust our menu to meet people with various dietary needs. Please give us a try back or a check or come back to our website in a few months, as we may add a few things or something of that nature.
Excellent, and thank you. I'm looking from left, or I don't know who exactly responded, but that is a smoother way to respond to someone who may have said something that you did not like. Because say the person's original feedback was very rude, simply because they said that to you in that specific way does not mean that you have to respond the same way. So it's why with emotional responses, we have to slow down and process before we put it back out there in order to really get the results that we're looking for. So yes, thank you for your honest feedback. Are there any specific recommendations? Thank you, guests, for sharing that as well in the chat. So yes, there are far better ways to say what we need to say. And these are extreme examples, but think about it this way. How many times have we maybe not said what we should have said the first time? Our initial reaction to something that our, again, supervisor has done, a coworker has done, a partner has done, whatever the case may be, wasn't exactly what we should have said the first time. You can just raise your hand, because I'll raise my hand. It happens all the time. For instance, here's a real life application for you. I had a mentee we had about a 25-year age difference. But even with that, I still had something to impart upon her, which goes back to you can evaluate anyone, or you can help anyone to evaluate. So she says, I'm going to send this message to my coworker because he keeps helicoptering around me and trying to tell me how to do my job. And I read the email and said, oh no, I can actually clutch my pearls because I have some on. And I said, let's find a different way to say what we need to say without being abrasive. And so we switched the wording so she could get the results that she wanted. Had she sent it the way that it was, it probably would have caused more of an issue than she had anticipated. Because yes, we have people who are going to annoy us or who make us feel like we don't know what we're doing or whatever the case may be. So there are ways to do that. Next frame. There is feedback overload all around us. Trust me, there are surveys at work. I work for the federal government, and we have surveys that evaluate our programs and the agency as a whole. And I'm sure you all put surveys and feedback out there too, whether it be Survey Monkey, whether it be some sort of scaling like at the bottom with, was it good? No, maybe, possibly. So you're putting it out there because you want to know how you can improve. You want results. Even at the end of your fast food receipt, there's how do we do? So it seems like a bit of an overload, if you will, but it's important. It's important. People are saying, oh, why should I do this? They're not going to change. You don't actually know until you put it out there. The very thing that you have to say, because you have something to say, could be the shift that the company or the person needs to truly improve. And yes, I know that you probably don't have 285,000 emails full of, feedback questionnaires like I do. Yes, my email inbox looks like that sometimes, but they're asking for a purpose. And that brings me to the purpose of the value of feedback and evaluations. And the purpose is solely results. You're not just simply going in front of an audience or talking to whomever it is that you need to talk to because you don't want anything to happen. You are looking for growth. You are looking for change. You are looking for better leadership. You're looking for better outcomes. So the purpose of evaluations are results. Feedback is all about being results driven. And it's something that we've been folding in the entire time during this presentation. If I'm asking you how I did, and I will be asking you how I did, it's because I'm looking to improve for future audiences. If you're asking your children, who may be the pickiest of eaters, how were the chicken nuggets or how were the green beans? I like these, mommy or daddy, but maybe I don't like that. So sometimes you're hard as critics, but you're looking for results because the result could be you want them to eat more green, or you want them to finish their plate, or you want someone who's going to allow you to do your work without being consistently interrupted. Whatever your goal or results are, that's what you're looking for. But here's the thing with results. Results take time. Nothing just happens over time. You didn't become an exceptional cook, no matter whether your grandparents, parents, godmother, whomever raised you, taught you. It took time to get the results that you were looking for and then to make the dish your own. So results take time. I want to drop 20 pounds, that takes time. I want to grow out my hair, that takes time. I want a relationship that's built on trust and whatever else I'm looking for. It takes time. So patience, which brings me to number 2, patience is required. You're going to have to get some patience when it comes to putting out your opinion, saying what needs to change, and then waiting for it to happen, because it's not instantaneous. I would love for it to be. I'm a millennial, the microwave generation, but even I understand that if I really want long-lasting results, and you do too, you're going to have to wait for it. But just because you're waiting for it doesn't mean that improvement isn't necessary, whether on the receiving end. So if someone is telling you this is what I need from you, and they're patient and there's no change, then that doesn't really help as far as feedback goes. So improvement is going to be the way that you really shift and really expand and grow, and whatever else it is that the person's asking of you, because you're going to take that time to ingest the information. You're going to take the time to digest and see how it sits with you. And then you're going to decide what you're going to do with that afterwards. And if someone is giving it to you in a strengths improvement conclusion format, SIC, then what you can do is truly consider it. Don't always come with emotional response. Make sure you're slowing down and really taking time to process and do some self-evaluation in the midst of their evaluation to determine what your next steps should be. So I say all this to say, no matter what your goal is or what you want your end result to be, it all begins with proper delivery of feedback. You can move mountains and change minds and situations just by how you present what you're doing. Your tone matters. Your facial expressions matter. Your body language matters. All of it is a part of a delivery that will help you get to those results that you are looking for. It's how you end up having better relationships with people from different companies or stakeholders. It's how you form more rapport with the people who work with you or the people that you hire. It's all about proper delivery. Just because it springs from just because it comes into your head and springs from your mouth doesn't mean it's going to be something people can use. So you have to be mindful of what you serve to others and how it is served. And also on the opposite end, you have to be mindful of how you receive what's being served and what you do with it afterwards. There's a speaker with a quote that I remember that says, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And I agree. It needs to be something that you are taking the time to make a part of your life and really being able to kind of read through that and see what you need. Or as a country saying would be, chew up the meat, spit out the bones. So you'll learn as you go along. It's not a perfect process, but if you, again, take the time to ingest, digest, think about if there's upset, if you need to reject any information or anything, and then think about how you're presenting the information to people, I guarantee you that you will see improvement. It may not be immediate, but there will be goals, there will be certain pegs that are met, certain rings that you're kind of going through that will show you just how effective feedback is. So watch what you serve yourself, watch what you serve others, watch how you receive, and watch how you put it back out there. Because again, if results are the end goal, then again, proper delivery of feedback is absolutely essential. All right. So we have come to the end of this presentation. I hope this has been beneficial to you. It's a lot of information to compact into one sort of speech/presentation, but I want to know if you have any questions for me, anything that you would like clarity about. Maybe you have something to share about your own experience with feedback and you'd like a tip or some additional advice. This is your time to do so.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Sharing so I can see you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Lauren, excellent presentation on feedback. And we often say that at the heart of Toastmasters is feedback. It's the ability to take that, to be able to present, to be able to give and show how we can improve. What do you think the biggest challenge is for the receiver of that feedback is, for the receiver of that feedback, right? Like, what do you think is the biggest challenge that they face in even just asking for feedback?
That's a good question. So you're saying what's the biggest challenge for the receiver when asking for feedback?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the biggest challenge is being brave enough to ask. Sometimes when you're on a certain level or you're in a certain position, maybe you have a certain title, you might be apprehensive to ask people how you're doing because you feel like you should know what you're doing. And here's the thing, we are not going to know what we're doing 100% of the time. So if you want to grow as a leader or whatever you're asking for, first be brave enough to ask. And then when you ask, understand that it may not be easy to hear. The person may phrase it beautifully, again, strengths, improvements, but you have to be actually willing to hear what they have to say and not from a place of, again, emotion where you're just kind of like, oh, I could take your butt to Burger King. Ooh. Like, and people really do respond this way. So I would say come with understanding that you don't have to know everything. This is a genuine ask. And then not being so quick to jump if it's not specifically what you want to hear, because you did ask after all. Hope that's clear. Oh, I see another hand. Daphne.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I really love the fact that you highlighted the purpose of feedback and the different list of things people can get. From my experience, it has been very difficult sometimes to get feedback from people you work with. I think sometimes the person, your supervisor, your manager, or the VP might just be very like apprehensive about giving feedback. And sometimes I think we unintentionally set ourselves up to not receive transparent feedback from our colleagues. I want to know if you have any recommendation of how to build rapport with people, so when they do give us feedback, they are thinking about our growth and deliver it in a honest way.
I know people, a part of my agency, who do have issues with getting feedback from supervisors, and that is a difficult and sort of touchy situation, especially if they kind of, again, bypass you. I would say that if that doesn't happen, trying to just set up a quick meeting or trying to get feedback via email or something along those lines, I would say find someone. I don't know if there's someone below the supervisor who might be familiar with your work or something along those lines, but perhaps somebody else who has just as great of a leadership position, to give you the, the information, the help that you're looking for, because sometimes it may not happen from, higher up, but there can be somebody who's noticed your work or who you've worked with who can give you just as much substance as maybe your manager, your supervisor could. That's what I would say to do. There's someone else that sees you and can help you in that way if you can't get the results that you're looking for from your boss. And I would say to look for that person.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I see our guest Tiffany has her hand up. Yes. On mute. I think you know that though.
Okay, sorry about that. Trying to navigate this. So my question for you, and again, great presentation. That was very well thought out and put together. My question is, what are some ways or suggestions to keep the conversation going when you've given thoughtful, well-served feedback and it's rejected, but you need the recipient to come into the conversation to kind of put those walls down? Do you have any recommendations on kind of disarming that rejection?
These are excellent questions, by the way, ladies. Thank you so much. That is a tough one, because it's hard to get someone to change if they don't want to. If they don't want to take the steps to do it, then you can't force them. But I'm not really sure how the feedback was delivered. For example, say you had 3 things that you wanted them to change. Maybe for the person, it was overwhelming. I know 3 things, it sounds like, oh, that's simple. But maybe if, working with them to change that one thing, and even if it takes a longer amount of time, that might make you feel like you're, again, getting more of those results that you're looking for, versus saying, here's all the things that you need to change. Everyone, again, doesn't have the same drive to get things done in a quick manner. And sometimes, again, they might feel overwhelmed, or, again, the emotional response, maybe feeling attacked. So maybe focusing on one thing and maybe helping them to work on that together, because sometimes change is a collective thing versus an individual thing. Sometimes we need an extra push. And then if they don't want to change, let the change happen naturally on its own then, because again, you can't force them, but I wouldn't put too much energy into they're not going to do it at all, because that takes away what you could be doing. But if you can, I guess, make it more palatable for them by just this little thing, I think one little thing and a change helps out way more than just saying, here you go, this is all that you need to do with some help. So I hope that helps. I thought I saw a question in here.
I want to point out, Lauren, Bookie's had a question. I thought it was really, really good. You know, receiving feedback without damaging relationships, and it's in the chat. But she, talked about tone and and now that feedback comes in. It's nice when you have a dialogue face to face, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're looking at other means of communication and people's, how would you address that, or how do you talk to mm-hmm. that element of the experience of feedback?
Absolutely. There is tone in text, and people can't see your face or read your emotions behind a screen. So you have to choose your words carefully, and it means maybe not submitting your opinion or whatever it is that you're typing up immediately. You need to take time to process that. Again, like with the mentee that I had, getting somebody else to read it to see, hey, does what I'm trying to say come off the way that I mean? And if it doesn't, that's when you start tweaking to say, maybe instead of saying, I don't agree with you, I don't think this is the right thing to do, perhaps you could say something along the lines of, I see where you're coming from with X, and here's my potential solution for Y. So picking the right words that don't sound like it's an attack, because you may not mean anything at all, but what people read and what they hear, how they hear it in their head, is going to be completely different than what you say. There's a communications model that has two heads here. What the person is putting out, what they receive, what the person throws back, what they receive. And in the midst of it is noise. There's like a symbol for like noise. So that's where it all gets lost. So picking your words carefully, getting someone else to read over that would probably be the best way to go about going about non-physical communication, and you're just doing all the virtual work. I think I've run out of time. These are great questions.